What if holiness isn't about perfection, but about practice? In Holy Habits, you'll experience the small, consistent rhythms that build a life of purpose and peace. From reading scripture to finding mentors, these habits don't just change what you do, they change who you become. Join Sycamore Creek for this 6-week series leading up to Easter. Holy Habits, small choices, sacred rhythms, a life that lasts.
When I graduated from high school, and really even from college, I wasn't super worried about the graduation ceremony. I didn't feel particularly attached to the people I was graduating with. Everything just seemed kind of par for the course. Those achievements were just what I was supposed to be doing. I wish I could tell you more than that, but that's really what I remember about those big days. But then, roughly 10 years after I graduated from college, I enrolled in a graduate seminary program. When I started seminary, my kids were 1, 4, and 6 years old. You can see in this picture my daughter helping me with my homework. She shared her leftover yellow Twizzler with me too. I worked an additional part-time job and the workload was intense. I began a countdown clock, 365 days before my graduation date. And since the seminary I was graduating from was 9 hours away from where I lived in North Carolina, I reserved an Airbnb months in advance. And I arranged for some close friends and family to join us. I had about 9 or 10 people who were going to travel with us. I was really looking forward to this. It was a big deal. But what I haven't mentioned is that I graduated in May of 2020. So about a month before graduation, the ceremony was delayed to November. And then it was moved to be fully online. And when the day of graduation finally arrived, it felt like my life had already moved on. In many ways, it had. I had moved to a new state. I began a new job. I had imagined walking across the stage in all of my regalia, shaking the seminary president's hand and receiving my diploma. I was prepared to cry a little. And instead, the big moment happened around my kitchen table with my immediate family. The moment that I had waited for and hyped up in my mind didn't land the way that I thought it would. I thought it would bring me all kinds of happiness, but it just didn't bring me the joy that I had expected. And now I wonder, why did I pile all of that expectation onto the ceremony itself? What if joy isn't something we arrive at all in one moment, but is something that we practice? Today, we're wrapping up a series called Holy Habits, and it's based on the book by Noah Heron. He is a pastor, an author, and a speaker. And as we wrap up, let me remind you of some of our key learnings. Holy habits are daily habits that help us stay in love with God. And in this series, we're working together to engage these habits because we want to stay in love with God. And in a letter attributed to the Apostle Paul, he wrote to his mentee Timothy that while physical training is of some value, godliness is valuable in every way, holding promise for both the present life and the life to come. The habits we're learning about are the godly training that Paul is referring to. And all of this is important because an encounter with Jesus will set us free, and our spiritual habits will keep us free. Today, we're going to explore celebration, and we might say that an encounter with Jesus will set us free, and our celebration will keep us free. Now, I told a story about how my graduation hit. And you may not have missed a graduation during the pandemic, although you might have, or you might have missed a different big milestone during that time. But maybe there were other things you thought would make you happy that when they came, they didn't land the way you expected. Or maybe there was a time when your expectation of something didn't match the reality. It could be a new job, getting married, having a baby, getting a new house or a car. Let's pause here for a chat question. Talk about a time when your expectation didn't match reality. Turn to someone around you or put it in the chat. Many of us have experienced this or do experience this. We think that happiness will come from the next big thing. Like when I get the big job or the big promotion, I'll be so excited. When I finally have a partner or get married, that will be when I feel happy. When I have stability or success, I'll be ready to celebrate. But here's the thing. Daniel Gilbert, a Harvard psychologist, reflected in his book, Stumbling on Happiness, that people who expected a big jump in happiness from major life experiences didn't experience much lasting change. So maybe you had a momentary burst of joy when you accomplished a promotion or landed the job or got married or fill in the blank, but maybe it didn't last. He found that the happiest people were those who noticed and celebrated the small things. He said, joy grows like a snowball rolling down a hill in the middle of winter. When we're constantly looking for the next big thing to make us happy, the happiness doesn't tend to last. But when we notice and celebrate the small things, it makes a huge difference. And sometimes I find myself doing the same kind of thing with my faith, especially around this time of year. Like we might start to feel like Easter will be the breakthrough, probably especially if you've been fasting from something leading up to Easter and you can't wait to indulge. Easter is like the thing you're waiting for. We keep looking ahead to the next thing to bring us joy. Now, we're in the week before Easter. It's a day that's referred to as Palm Sunday in some Christian traditions, and some Christian traditions pay more attention to this than others. It's called Palm Sunday because 1 week before Jesus' death and resurrection, he entered into the city of Jerusalem, where he would later be executed. And on his way into Jerusalem, people gathered around to celebrate him, and they laid their cloaks and also palm branches down on the ground to make his path. See, Palm Sunday tells a different story about joy. The people laid down palm branches and shouted words of praise and joy. They shouted, Hosanna. It's a word that means save us in Hebrew. They said, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming kingdom of our father David. They recognized Jesus as a descendant of King David, and they really expected him to be a ruler like David and to lead in the tradition of a warrior king. And they said, Hosanna in the highest heaven. This crowd is celebrating before Jesus' death, before his resurrection, before the world got turned on its head. This is joy that's loud but fragile. It's hopeful but incomplete. This isn't naive joy. It's defiant joy. And what if joy is a practice? The writer of Proverbs says that the prospect of the righteous is joy, but the hopes of the wicked come to nothing. So it's not just that we're looking forward to some future outcome that's full of joy. The looking forward itself is joyful. And this reminds me of John Wesley's means of grace. John Wesley is the founder of the Methodist movement that gave rise to the United Methodist Church, and Sycamore Creek is United Methodist. He said that there are an infinite number of means of grace. Now, means of grace are pathways through which we might experience God's grace. And there are expected means of grace, pathways in which we can typically expect God's grace, things like reading our Bible and Sabbath rest, a lot of the holy habits that we've explored already in this series. And there are an infinite, unexpected ways that we might experience God's grace. These means of grace are not the grace in themselves. They're channels through which we experience God's grace. And we might think of joy in a similar way. Practices of joy aren't the joy themselves. We can't use practices to manufacture joy, but the practices position us to notice joy. Practices of joy position us to receive joy. Here's our key theological frame. Joy isn't something we earn or achieve. Joy is something we open ourselves to again and again. Noah Heron introduced me to something he calls confetti theology. Confetti theology is their small celebrations and big joy. Confetti theology is marked by earnest praise and imperfect joy that's just offered honestly, kind of like palm branches. Those palm branches that have come to be the symbol of this week in the Christian calendar were small, ordinary, and fleeting, kind of like confetti. This is about looking for small moments to throw a bit of confetti, to celebrate a moment with the people around you. Recently, I completed another step in the path toward ordination. This process is a little confusing, but I submitted a 25-page paper answering theological questions December 1. And then I had around 3 hours of interviews at the beginning of March. All candidates leave the interviews not knowing whether they received a no, a not yet, or a yes. The no means there's something significant in your answers that indicates you really ought not be a pastor. A not yet means that the board has seen something in your answers that make them think, well, you could use some more time to work on some parts of your theology and practice before you're ready for the next stage of ministry. A yes at this stage means that the candidate will be commissioned at our annual conference in May to be a provisional elder. And then the candidate gets to spend the next 3 years working toward the next milestone, which is to become an elder in full connection. So I left my interviews. They were on a Tuesday, feeling pretty confident, but also not wanting to be overconfident. I have hated moments of feeling super confident and then being disappointed in my results. And I did not want to experience that. So I was hedging my optimism just a little bit. On Thursday, I still hadn't heard anything. And they had told me that it would be Thursday or Friday before I heard, so that wasn't like super worrying. But that Thursday, I had a lunch gathering with United Methodist clergy in the area. This is something we do every other month. And at the end of that lunch, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, and I stepped out to take it. After a 36-second phone call, I returned to our lunch with good news. I passed my interviews. The clergy there celebrated with me. One of them bought me a beer from the restaurant we were at. It was a small confetti moment. And when I thought about this later, I realized how grateful I was to be with them in that moment. Most of those clergy had gone through the same process. And if they hadn't gone through it, they were familiar with it. They knew what a significant moment this was for me. I imagine what it would have been like if I was home alone and got that 30-second phone call, how anticlimactic it would feel. There was something really special about having that moment in community with people who understood and were excited with me. I had missed the big celebration with my community for graduation, but I got this small confetti moment with my community for passing my interviews. Let's pause here for another chat question. I want you to talk about a moment that was more meaningful because you shared it with others. Turn to someone around you or put it in the chat. So what might this look like in your life? It's not forced positivity. It's intentional joy and celebration. So the first aspect of Confetti theology is that we're going to celebrate yourself. For many of us, it's easier to be self-critical than to meaningfully celebrate ourselves. So try to notice and celebrate your growth instead of shaming yourself for not being further along. Allow yourself to be earnest about joy. Many of us experienced at one point or another someone mocking us for our earnest joy, and that can be difficult to move past. But I hope that you can risk it. I hope that you can practice joy that's earnest and unworried about what other people think. This reminds me a little bit of the acceptance speech that Snoop Dogg gave for his Hollywood star. I want to thank me, is what he started with. So celebrate yourself. And remember that joy doesn't require a rival. You don't have to achieve a certain thing for it to be worth joy. You don't have to earn the right to joy. You only need to be aware of the things that already bring you joy and nurture them. Practice celebrating yourself with small celebrations and big joy. The second piece of Confetti theology is to celebrate others. Jesus told us to love our neighbors as ourselves. In fact, he said that this is the second greatest commandment, only after loving God with everything we have. So maybe we could expand that idea to celebration. If we're learning how to celebrate ourselves, we can celebrate our neighbors as ourselves. We can look for signs of growth, courage, faithfulness in others, instead of focusing on where people aren't there yet. I wonder if this can especially be helpful in some of our conversations about justice. There's this thing I've noticed that when someone who has been vocally on one side, we'll call it side one, begins to take steps toward justice, whatever particular work that is, on the other side, side two, the people who have been on side two for a long time criticize this person. Like, do you expect a gold star because you're just realizing what marginalized people have been saying for decades? And maybe sometimes that might be warranted. But I also think that when side two is too cynical, we might unintentionally make it difficult for folks to change their minds about things. Why would people want to take a step toward justice if they're going to be shamed for it by those who are further along? What if we could acknowledge that growth, that small step, for the victory it is? When we celebrate others and can celebrate loudly and generously, like take your friend out for a drink when they accomplish something, buy them a beer. Send them a card in the mail or a text message. Let them see your emotion when you're proud of them or struck by their resilience. Don't hold back, because joy multiplies when it's shared. Practice celebrating others with small celebrations and big joy. Number 3, celebrate even in bad times. Now, this one can be a little tricky to talk about because it's not about finding a silver lining. It's not about taking lemons and making lemonade, because sometimes you only have ingredients for a turd sandwich, in which case you can make a joke and say a prayer. This image on the screen is from Scott Erickson, and there's a prayer that went with it from Justin McRoberts. This is from their shared book, In the Low. Here's the prayer. I know when I'm given lemons, I'm supposed to make lemonade. And I know I'm supposed to take my pain and turn it into something useful. But today, with the ingredients of my life in front of me, all I feel like I can make is a turd sandwich. Thank you for hearing my honest prayer. Celebrating in the bad times is about holding joy and grief together. It's about giving yourself permission to be more than just one thing, giving yourself permission to feel more than one thing at a time. You can feel profound grief and profound joy simultaneously. Palm Sunday teaches us that joy can exist even when the road leads to the cross. Even when the end of the journey is the worst thing you can imagine, there can be moments of joy along the way and joy after the worst thing comes true. Palm Sunday teaches us that living in the both and, I feel both joy and grief, is a kind of faithfulness. We're both full of joy and acknowledging the grief. So practice celebrating, even in bad times, with small celebrations and big joy. When I reflect on the kind of community I want to build, it's one that throws confetti instead of withholding celebration. I don't want to be stingy with my celebration. I want to build a community that notices small signs of life and growth and names them out loud. Joy isn't something we arrive at all in one moment, but is something that we practice. And it grows like a snowball rolling downhill. Joy is a habit that we develop. It's a holy habit that helps us stay in love with God, because an encounter with Jesus will set us free. Our spiritual habits will keep us free. Or, as we might say today, an encounter with Jesus will set us free. Celebration will keep us free. And today on Palm Sunday, I want to invite us to practice celebration together. Our final chat is sort of a time of reflection, but you can also turn to someone around you or put this in the chat. What's one thing that you're celebrating today? Take a minute and talk about it.